Hey everyone, welcome back to Bible class. Now, this might be a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, but it is something I gotta talk about. Was Saul's name changed to Paul? We're all very familiar with the story in the New Testament of, Saul of Tarsus, who becomes Paul, the evangelist. We're all familiar with the story of his conversion, about how he gets knocked off his horse and blinded, and all of those fun details. And along with those details, part of that story is usually, and Saul, who was a persecutor of the church, had his name changed to Paul. And now he's going to go and be an evangelist and a witness for Jesus. But is that actually what happens in the Bible? You see, Paul's conversion, we're told about a bunch of times in the book of Acts. It first happens in Acts chapter 9, where we get the actual narrative of it. But then Paul retells his story again in Acts 22, and he tells it even a third time in Acts 26. And none of those narratives have anything about his name being changed. That is something that people have completely made up and overlaid into those stories. Jesus did not tell Paul to change his name. He did not say, you used to be Saul, who was a persecutor of me, and now you're going to be Paul, the evangelist for me. That didn't happen. People keep trying to make that as part of the story and say, well, you see, back in the Old Testament, people had their name changed. Abram became Abraham, Jacob became Israel, even Joshua and Gideon have their names changed. But that's not what happens in the book of Acts. That's not the story of Saul to Paul. Even after his conversion in Acts 9, he is still called Saul for the next 4 chapters. It's not until Acts 13:9 where it tells us Saul, who is also called Paul. And from that point on, his name is Paul in the text, which lends people to say, well, his name clearly was changed because now Luke, the author of Acts, is calling him Paul. But not so fast, my friends. This is just not what happened here. You see, in the first century, it was very common for Hebrews to have both a Hebrew name and a Greek/Roman name. Like Saul, who is also called Paul, or Simon, who is also called Peter, or even Tabitha, who is also called Dorcas. We have several examples of this in the New Testament. This isn't like the first time this had ever happened. Paul tells us very explicitly that he is a Roman citizen. So no doubt he would have a Roman citizen name. And Shaul is not a Roman name, but Paulus would be. So why does this bother me so much? Well, because whenever we say that his name was changed, there's usually a lot of underlying motivation behind that. We usually like to say that at that moment, Saul forsook the Judaism of his day, forsook his background, his training, his heritage, his genealogical record, and became a Christian, and now was following Jesus and did away with all of his observance of God's law and all of his love for God's Torah and his prophets and his writings. But that's not what Paul himself says. Paul describes himself as a Pharisee of the strictest sect. He calls himself a Hebrew of Hebrews. He describes himself in glowing terms for the Judaism of his day. He says, as to the law, he was blameless. Paul in no way was forsaking the Judaism of his day, but rather his audience in his letters, like to the Galatians, to the Ephesians, the Philippians, the Colossians, the Corinthians, all of these different people groups were Gentile people groups. They were Greek speakers, so it makes sense for him to use his Greek name when speaking to them. Why does this matter? Well, it just really bothers me that people keep claiming that Paul wasn't Jewish anymore, that he somehow changed that, despite the fact that he says everything to the contrary to it himself. But somehow this inaccuracy lives on in sermons and VBS lessons and Bible songs, but yet it holds no biblical validity. So here at Bible class, we're all about searching the scriptures to find out what they say. So do you have any pet peeves about some things like this that people just always get wrong? If you do, please leave them in the comments. Maybe we'll make some more videos addressing those topics. But thanks for joining us here at Bible class, and be sure to check out some of our other lessons.